Hi, I'm Glenn Hughes.
And I'm Ed Muzio.
For 3 decades, I've been working inside a publicly traded company.
And for over a decade, I've been an entrepreneur supporting companies like Glenn's from the outside.
In this series, we look at the problems and challenges of the modern workplace
And provide our ideas and advice.
From the inside
and out. Help, I've just become a manager. I often get people who say, now I'm in management, what do I need to know? It's kind of a big question, but how would you answer that question?
Well, there's a lot of tools and a lot of frameworks that can be used as a manager, but I think probably the key difference between individual contributor and manager is you now own a team. So I usually want to start there. And there are a number of good team models for the development of a team or the building of a team. Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team is great. Probably the simplest one to think about team dynamics is the Tuckman's model.
Forming, storming, norming, performing.
Absolutely. A forming team that doesn't know each other and has to evolve and get to know each other and create a mission. A storming team where you want to have authentic disagreement and discussion to arrive at a owned vision for the future. Norming, where you figure out your roles and how to play well together and deliver the product. And then the one teams don't always reach, performing, where the whole is literally greater than the sum of its parts, and the leader doesn't need to focus on dictating or driving people. I think knowing where you are and taking people on that journey, it's a great way to think about the team dynamics.
We always talk about, I always talk about reforming as part of that model too, which is don't forget once you add or take away somebody, you fall back, wherever you were, you fall back to the beginning. And be cognizant of that as a manager, you're always kind of working your way up that ladder, always kind of falling back down.
Yep. So what's another tool you would add?
A closely related issue to how the team works together is what the team is doing and who's doing what. And one of the most useful models I know of for looking at that is the RACI model, RACI, right? So that's just a simple acronym that lets you figure out for each person either on the team or involved with the work, are they R, responsible? Are they A, accountable? Are they C, consulted? Or are they I, informed? So responsible is they have to do the work. Accountable is they're accountable to the organization. That's the manager of the person doing the work. Consulted is somebody who can give a yes or a no along the way because it impacts their work. And informed is somebody who gets to hear about what's going on but doesn't get a vote. Now we used to also sometimes add an O at the end, ratio, and say O is everybody else, which is they have no role, they're not involved.
Right.
And it's important to just sort of say who's got their fingers in the pie in what ways. If you don't do that as a manager, especially in complex work, you'll end up doing nothing but stakeholder management and never getting anywhere.
I'm glad you mentioned complex work because in fact the RACI will be different generally for every task. And as an individual contributor working for you as my manager, I'll be responsible for one task, accountable to 2 others, consulting on 4 others, and informed on 10 others. Right? It's really important for me to understand if I'm going to do effective work for you, where I'm not responsible, where I'm only informed, and vice versa.
That's right. And that raises a good point about RACI, which is you can use it to make a big matrix in a team and look at it all together, and that's useful. But you should also use it kind of in one-on-one conversations. Let me make sure you understand where you are, Glenn. On this one, you're consulted, you're not, right? I mean, just making it part of your language as a manager is really
So that's
useful.
a double dip. So as a manager, not only would you use it with your team, but you will use it to decide what you're responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed as in your new role as a manager.
Use it for yourself, too. Like you always say, put your own oxygen mask on before you help your kid, right? What else would you recommend for new managers, concepts or models?
The other tool I got that I think I got too late, and when people get it, they're really kind of jolted by it, is what's sometimes called the Eisenhower Matrix or the Urgency Importance Matrix that Covey has popularized. This one asks you to build a 2x2 diagram based on low urgency, high urgency, low importance, high importance. And it's called the Eisenhower Matrix because Eisenhower once said, what's urgent is seldom important, and what's important is seldom urgent.
It's easy to get sucked into that urgency box that isn't important, absolutely.
That's right, and the stuff that is important but not urgent is really where the manager, in their transformation to becoming a leader, should be spending their time. You need to parse out quality time. So what I like to challenge people to do is take all their tasks and place it and see where they're spending their time. 90% of people are not spending enough time in the important but not urgent. And so then how do you slice out time to do the things that are really going to move the needle?
You know, we have a pretty complex management simulation called the dress rehearsal. And one of the lessons that managers take away from that, the leaders take away from that when they run the whole table, the whole organization, is when everybody else is busy, they shouldn't be. So if they're caught up in the urgency of everybody else, that's a mistake. They need to be looking ahead to the next round, the next hill, the next thing. That's part of that, focusing on what's important, not what's urgent.
Great. And what else do you have?
You know, if there's one more I was going to give, it would be the one that is my highest hits on YouTube for the whiteboard videos, and that is the ladder of inference. And that just basically says we build our own models of reality in our head with some certain steps, and it's helpful to know what those steps are. We start with what we observe, and then we start to add meaning to it through assumptions. We fill in the blanks through assumptions, and pretty soon we start to take actions based on our assumptions. So I see you sitting in a meeting, you're checking your mail on your phone, I start thinking Glenn doesn't care what's going on here. Pretty soon I've concluded that Glenn isn't a very good employee, and then I start going, Glenn, what have you been doing lately? And I take a tone with you, and now I've driven it in that direction, when really maybe you're working on a project for me on that phone, right? I don't know. So the model is a little more than that, and you can look it up, but the point is, be aware of where you're filling in gaps in real information with your own assumptions, and don't do it as best you can, because as a manager, you can really hurt somebody's career, their livelihood, by accident.
Yeah, we often talk about this similarly as above the surface, below the surface.
Yeah,
right? I see your behavior, right? What are the assumptions I'm making about your behavior, and what's feeding it? And often it's much better if I don't make any of those assumptions, and I just come and ask.
Right. It's almost like blank slate tabula rasa, if you can. Just say, let me learn what's going on, as opposed to injecting my own reality on top of it. Absolutely.
So we've talked about 4 different tools today. We started with the team model, which we talked about Tuckman's model.
Then we looked at RACI, a way of looking at who does what.
We looked at urgency and importance to decide where you spend your time.
And finally, we looked at ladder of inference, a way of looking at what assumptions you're making that might not be right.
So as a manager, what other tools have you found useful?